1974. Ornithologist Don Merton received permission for one final expedition into Fiordland to officially confirm that the Kakapo no longer existed. In the 25 years prior, the Wildlife Service had conducted 61 expeditions into these mountains. 6 birds had been found. 5 of them died. Merton was meant to confirm the inevitable, but instead of proof of extinction, he found 18 living Kakapo. Then, on another island, around 200 more. The problem was that nearly all of them turned out to be male. The first confirmed female was not found until several years later, and time was almost gone. By 1995, only 51 Kakapo remained alive. New Zealand then launched an unprecedented operation to save the species. All the birds were relocated to safe islands, and every new nest became worth its weight in gold. But the hardest part of the rescue was only just beginning. The Kakapo, Strigops habroptilus, is the largest parrot on the planet. Nocturnal and flightless. It weighs up to 4 kilograms and lives for up to 100 years. It breeds once every few years, and only under one condition that humans came to understand far later than they assumed. For 60 million years, it existed in New Zealand without a single mammalian predator. It never learned to fear, because there was nothing to fear. When people introduced cats, rats, and stoats, the bird had no defense. The only thing that saved it was the fact that the most inaccessible mountain valleys remained predator-free longer than the rest. It was there in Fiordland between 1974 and 1977 that ornithologist Don Merton found 18 Kakapo after decades of searching. All males. A population without females is functionally gone. The birds exist, but reproduction is impossible. In 1977, the search shifted to Stewart Island, an island 160 kilometers to the south. There, the booming calls of around 200 birds were heard, but again, no females. For 3 years, the team continued searching. Then in 1980, a hunting dog led a guide to a bird nestled between tree roots, smaller, slimmer, greener. A female. The first confirmed in decades. Soon 4 more were found, with nests and chicks. The species could breed, but the population on Stewart Island was declining rapidly due to feral cats. These birds were gradually, between 1980 and 1997, moved to island sanctuaries. They became the foundation of the 1995 program. And they immediately began to reveal that the island was the beginning of new questions. Islands without cats and stoats. Supplementary feeding. Round-the-clock monitoring. Conditions were the best in the species' entire documented history. The birds did not breed. It is important to understand something about island protection here. The idea was not new. It was first applied by Richard Henry back in 1894. He transferred nearly 400 Kakapo to Resolution Island in Fiordland, the world's first island sanctuary for birds at risk. In 1900, stoats swam the channel and wiped out the entire population within a few years. Henry lost through execution. The 1995 program had absorbed that lesson. Islands were chosen farther from the mainland, carefully cleared of predators, and any introduction of materials was strictly controlled. But one predator was not removed because it was not considered critical: rats. They did not touch the adult birds, but they found and destroyed eggs and newly hatched chicks. Data from the islands showed that rats were disrupting up to a third of all nesting attempts. Of the 12 chicks that hatched between 1980 and 1995 across 3 islands, only 3 survived. The birds were nesting. The eggs were disappearing. The program protected the nests from rats. But even after that, the birds nested far too infrequently, and nobody understood why. The team provided supplementary food. They developed artificial pellets containing every nutrient they could identify. The birds ate, they looked healthy, and they almost never nested. Years of research followed. The Kakapo does not breed on a seasonal schedule. It waits for a signal from a specific tree. Rimu, Dacrydium cupressinum, is a New Zealand podocarp pine that can live for 500 years. Once every 2 to 6 years, it produces a mass fruiting, and that is the trigger. A female Kakapo will not begin nesting until she has seen enough Rimu fruit, regardless of how much other food is available. For a long time, this was interpreted as a behavioral pattern. The bird responds to abundance of food, logical. Provide abundance of other food, and the same response should follow. It did not. In 2015, researchers at Massey University found the answer. Rimu fruit contains 8.4 milligrams of calcium per gram of dry matter, critically necessary for egg formation and the skeletal development of the chick. It also contains both forms of vitamin D, vitamin D2, and vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 had until then been considered exclusively animal-derived, because science held that plants did not synthesize it. Rimu does. For a female forming eggs and raising a chick alone for months without any contribution from the male, this is a physiological trigger without which nesting does not initiate at the molecular level. No artificial feed could replicate it, because nobody knew what needed to be replicated. What this meant was the following. In years when Rimu on a particular island did not fruit, Kakapo did not nest, regardless of the program's efforts. The bird held to its own terms. 2002. On Codfish Island, Rimu fruits appeared in massive quantities for the first time in several seasons. The window opened. The program decided to maximize the outcome. Intensive supplementary feeding of all females to bring them into the best possible physical condition for nesting. The logic was simple. A healthier female means more eggs, more chicks. More chicks were indeed born. But when the team counted the sexes, it turned out that 70% were male. In a species where males already outnumbered females, the program had just deepened the imbalance with its own hands. The mechanism proved to be evolutionary. The kakapo is a species where males are 30 to 40% larger than females and require more resources to grow. A better-fed female invests more in the costlier males, an ancient evolutionary logic that works against a small population trying to recover. The solution was counterintuitive. Reduce feeding to the level at which the female is healthy enough to nest, but does not accumulate excess weight. At this level of diet, the sex ratio returned to approximately 50-50. This was the first time in history that the sex of an entire species' chicks had been deliberately adjusted through changes to the mother's diet. The population grew by 39% in the 2002 season. But only because the team understood, you cannot simply feed the bird more. You have to feed it precisely as it would find food in nature, no more. From that point, the trajectory changed, not sharply, slowly, season by season, in the years when Rimu fruited. 2005 produced a few chicks. 2009 produced more. The population crossed 100 individuals, then 150. Every year without Rimu was a pause. Every year with Rimu was a step forward. By 2016, the population had doubled relative to 1995. Over the following 6 years, it doubled again. The program sequenced the genomes of all living kakapo and some of the dead, one of the first instances in history where scientists had fully sequenced the genome of an entire species, not a sample but every individual. The conclusion was stark. 36 unique genetic lineages. For long-term survival through a population bottleneck, a minimum of 50 is needed. The kakapo was already below this threshold and would never cross it because the source material no longer exists. Those 51 birds of 1995 were all there was. All 236 alive today are their descendants. This means that rangers are no longer managing just a population, they are managing evolution. Every pairing is planned against genetic records. Eggs are transferred between nests so that a female raises a chick with genetics as different from her own as possible. Some chicks are hand-reared and returned to the natural environment. By this point, the program's technological arsenal had moved far beyond radio transmitters and notebooks. When a female settles on an egg, rangers sometimes replace it with a replica. The real egg is taken to an incubator with controlled temperature and humidity. The female continues to sit and suspects nothing. The replicas are made by Weta Workshop, the same studio that made props for The Lord of the Rings. Printed on a 3D printer, correctly weighted with a speaker inside. At a certain stage, the egg begins to call, preparing the female for the chick's arrival. When the chick in the incubator reaches the right age, it is returned. The female accepts it as her own. This is not a trick for its own sake. Artificial incubation increases egg survival rates. Meanwhile, the female can recover her strength and, in a Rimu fruiting year, nest a second time. In 2019, 30 females nested twice. That is what produced the record 73 fledglings. A bird that had lived for 60 million years proved too rare to recover without hands-on management of every birth. It was during this period that the program came to understand something else. Every bird in it is an individual, not a unit in a spreadsheet. This was demonstrated most vividly by Sirocco, the Kakapo filmed live on BBC in 2009 attempting to mate with an ornithologist's head. The video went viral. Sirocco was appointed official ambassador for the species, the only Kakapo permitted to have contact with humans. He is still alive, still makes public appearances, and still behaves unpredictably. The program makes no attempt to change this. 2019 was supposed to be a triumph. Rimu fruited at record levels. Females nested en masse, 73 fledglings, the most in the program's entire history. And then aspergillosis appeared on Codfish Island. Aspergillus is a fungus present everywhere in the environment. In healthy birds, the immune system manages it. But Kakapo, with their genetic bottleneck and dense nesting colonies, proved vulnerable. 21 birds were infected. 9 died, females and chicks. The program evacuated 51 birds to the mainland for treatment in zoos and veterinary clinics. 51, exactly the number that had remained in 1995. The outbreak was contained. The rest of the birds were saved. But the epidemic demonstrated what geneticists had been warning about for years. The entire population lives on a handful of islands, carries 36 genetic lineages, and shares a common immunological vulnerability. A single pathogen on a single island could destroy what 30 years of work had built. That is why the program began thinking about the mainland, not as a triumphant return, but as insurance. If disease reached one island, there needed to be another population somewhere else. 2023. 20 male Kakapo are transferred to Sanctuary Mountain Dietary, a mainland reserve on the North Island protected by a 50-kilometer predator-proof fence. For the first time in more than 100 years, Kakapo were on mainland New Zealand. The program had kept them on islands for 40 years, not by preference, but because the mainland was dangerous. This was not a triumphant return to the wild. It was the first cautious attempt after 4 decades of island defense. 6 of the 10 birds in the first group climbed over the fence on their own. The Kakapo climbs with its beak and claws, and a 6-foot metal fence did not stop them. They were caught and returned to the island. The fence design was modified. A second attempt was launched. This was the same thing that had been happening on every island since 1995. The program builds conditions, the bird rejects them or finds a way around them. The team adapts. The bird shows where the next boundary is. The Kakapo is simply doing what it has done for 60 million years. February 2026. 236 Kakapo. From 51 over 31 years. Across 4 islands and 1 mainland sanctuary. Every bird with a name. Every pairing planned. And as this video goes out, something is happening that has never happened before. On February 14th, 2026, the first chick in 4 years hatched on Pukenui Island. It was named Tiwiri A1. Rimu that year fruited at record levels, 80 nests, 256 eggs. By April, 95 chicks had hatched. The previous record, 73 fledglings in 2019, was broken. 2026 is officially the biggest season in all of recorded history, the Department of Conservation wrote on the program's account. But there is a detail that explains why this happened now. In 1995, the program had 51 birds, 31 males, and only 20 females. 31 years of dietary manipulation, genetic records, and planned pairings delivered a result. Today, there are 83 females of reproductive age, 4 times more than at the start. The bird finally had enough females, because humans spent 30 years listening to what it was saying about food, about Rimu, and about the sex of its chicks. The method of island protection that was born as the only way to save one bird is today applied on 300 islands around the world. 820 documented eradication operations across 666 islands, 88% successful. But here is what matters to understand about these 236. Every step that led to this number happened because the bird refused to do what was expected of it, refused to breed until the program removed the rats, refused to nest without Rimu until science understood why, produced the wrong chicks when overfed until the program learned to count calories more precisely, climbed over the fence when returned to the mainland. Humans built the system, the bird showed where it didn't work, and so it went, for 31 years in a row. Richard Henry, the last kakapo from the Fiordland population, found in 1975, named after the naturalist who lost to the stoats in 1900, made his contribution. In 1998, he fathered 3 chicks. He died in December 2010 at approximately 80 years of age. Don Merton, the ornithologist who refused to believe in the species' extinction when everyone else did, traveled to Codfish Island in November 2010 to say goodbye to him in person. He survived him by only 4 months. 236 birds with names, their weights recorded yesterday, their genetic records on servers. This is an agreement with nature on the bird's terms. In January 2026, Deidre Verco, the program's operations manager, said, "We want to create healthy, self-sustaining populations of kakapo that thrive, not merely survive. With each successful season, we aim to reduce the level of intensive hands-on management. For 31 years, the program increased its control so the bird could survive. Now its goal is the opposite, to reduce that control so the bird can live on its own."